Hey guys, so I've realized that in most of my videos I'm telling a story and I'm telling about myself. And so just realize that it is a story, that connections are made even when I'm filming, that it's completely written for the first time, freshly new as I'm telling it, and that's the magic of a story. And I explained in my last week's video, about the story and how I feel that the story is such a powerful teaching. And there is the opposite teaching of letting go of the story, and then there's the teaching of loving the story. And that's something I'm finding lately is I switch from this like separate perspective to this holistic perspective. And this crazy analogy came up lately. I don't know what made me think of it, but if you've ever seen the TV series House, there's this scene I never forgot in it where he has this neighbor in his apartment building who's missing an arm, and he builds a mirror box for him and basically kidnaps him and sticks his arm in it to give the guy relief from the phantom pain. And if you look up phantom pain, it's this kind of crazy occurrence that happens in the brain. And of course, when you look into out of body experiences and everything, and you start to have some of those experiences, you start to understand why that crazy phenomenon is um, not psychosomatic, and yet all of our illnesses, even if they are completely documentable and really real and obvious, they are psychosomatic because this is entirely mind, and it's not personal, it's not the individual mind. Um, and so that, like, showing one of the techniques they do for phantom pain is they show a mirror and they show the person that their limb is whole, and then the brain recognizes that. And an awakening is like that you are completely whole, that you are not separate, that you are not cut off, and feeling that healing. And yet, so you know in the awakening, or you realize that there's no you, and what you imagined to be very real, what you imagined that everything hinged on, is not there. And yet after that there's still those phantom pains, and that's what I suppose liberation is aiming at, and all of these insights and this sort of work, so to speak, is aiming at. And it becomes very tempting to view it as work, and to think that there's should and shouldn'ts, and that when you're functioning from the individual, um, that there's a problem there, and then judging that individual. And so I've realized that when when the awakening happened, everything's completely cleared out. And I realized that the start of this was wanting to be in control of myself, really, really wanting to be in control of my emotions. And the height of not being in control of my emotions was times when I would be very angry and have episodes of rage happening. And my mother had those growing up and was deeply ashamed of them. They were pretty minor, and I know that so many people do, and almost everybody on that side of the family did, and then on my dad's side, not. And so he was constantly judging her for it as a character flaw. And so I equated that sort of emotional turbulence with the shame of being female. And so we create all kinds of stories and explanations for this. And so one of the funniest things that happened right after the awakening, I was in this completely like bliss state, is I had an episode of rage come up, and I realized that that was still a part of me, and it continued to shock me because I kept equating enlightenment with control of emotions, with emotional equanimity. And in my case, this comes out as a lot of guilt and shame. And I started watching this specific Roger Castillo episode that came out, or Sat Song, that came out fairly recently, and I'll link it in the comments below. And so I started watching it and didn't watch it again for a few days. And then I had this episode of rage boil up. And a couple days before that, I also had this episode of depression, whereas lately my life has been almost like paradise, a complete dream. And I've gone back to working, and I've been enjoying so much being able to get so inspired about something that I want to do, and some dream and vision for the future, and some project, and then pick up another, not feel like I'm failing on the last, and not feel this kind of like shaky feeling that it's not going to work out. Like the letting go and the embracing, I'm feeling that really start to sort of integrate. And it's for the past few months, life has just been really amazing. But I felt I've been so busy lately too. I've just had such energy because I don't have those thoughts shooting myself down and questioning. And I know there's certain habits I've dropped. I know better than to go into and watch news sites and start to think on problems. And so my energy is just completely focused, and it's amazing what I can do. But then that busyness comes up, and I started feeling depressed, and immediately I recognized it, and I knew I had to go and do something for myself. And right after the awakening, there was a lot of integration. And so something I did a lot is I went back to that clairvoyant doctor where his mansion was, which is now just like totally trees and forest. So I went back there just completely on my own, just to sit, just to see things and watch. And normally I would like to say that meditation is the perfect thing for letting go of those thoughts. But right now I'm having huge resistance about meditation. And it's almost like some of the techniques are so powerful for me that I have to do something a little bit less. So anyway, so I went to this place, and I also it's a fun thing to do. It's just a fun thing for me. So I made the intention really loosely that I wanted to find something cool. And so I went there, and a whole bunch of contemplations and connections came up. And so I went in the road, and then there's a few different places I'll go off in a certain direction. And I couldn't decide which way I wanted to go. And then I heard this loud crash in the woods. And in a previous video, I showed the black walnut shells with the heart and the like two eye things in them that I found there and never found the tree. So I was thinking, because I know black walnuts drop those, I was thinking I could find that. So I went off in that direction. And then I realized that it was an apple tree, and that an apple had fallen down. And then the entire story myth of the Garden of Eden came in, which was something that completely came into my psyche right before and during the awakening, of understanding that whole thing and how that fits in. And I'm going to have to make an episode completely dissecting and going through that. And so those kind of things were coming in, and so I realized that just sitting there and quietly contemplating these things and coming back, that it was really allowing me just to feel the emotion and the energy of the depression, and also having it come out in these kind of ways of understanding. Whereas if I had sat and meditate, I would have been shooting down those thoughts, but those thoughts were actually helping me to work through it. And so I didn't find anything super amazing aside from that, but I was completely happy. And on the way back, I felt like checking the free library box again. And the last time I checked it, I made a video about this in the past, you can watch it. It's one about devotion. I had left a red rose on the grave of the clairvoyant doctor, thinking it was just a silly, fun thing to do. And when I had an impulse to check the library box, I found this book with the title Vanish with the Rose, and had a girl and then a red rose on it. And red roses were a sign that like came into my psyche or symbol or something with the during the awakening too. A whole bunch of symbols, kind of weird things like that happened. Um, and so I looked in the box this time, and right in the same corner where that book had been were all of these super high consciousness resource cassette tapes, mostly aimed at healing and like mystical kind of healing. I can't think of her name right now. I'll list some of the names I found for women, like targeted at women. There's also Thich Nhat Hanh and like an Eckhart Tolle retreat cassette, and a whole bunch, just like this huge box of cassette tapes. And I had been thinking, sort of nostalgic, about the purple Walkman I had when I was a kid and listening to music on it, and also kind of getting into like this vintage design and decorating and stuff at the same time. And also had been wanting something to listen to while I work when the internet streaming isn't working, which has been happening to me really frequently. So I brought the cassette tapes home and ordered a cassette tape player. And so now I have all this stuff, which I normally wouldn't have seeked out, because I love the direct stuff like Jim Newman, that goes right for stuff. And I've realized that's been a realization that you saw within the last week or so, how much I've idolized men and wanted so bad that emotional equanimity and disowned my own range of emotions so much. And so that's been a big realization that's been happening for me. And then a couple days after this, the depression went away and I was right back to my complete energy and feeling awesome. And I'd started the Roger Castillo about anger being a biological reaction. And then the next day, my daughter, who is extremely like creative, intuitive, and really emotional, like makes a big deal out of everything. And I have a vegetable garden that I grow kale in. And so when you grow broccoli and kale, you always get these caterpillars that eat it. And so when I first, at the start of the summer, I showed her the caterpillars, and she thought they were absolutely disgusting. And so I kind of like conditioned her out of it to think that they were cute, and oh, here's the babies and stuff. And so all summer she's made homes for them and mothered them and everything. So she gets super emotional and attached to certain toys and everything. And it's very unlike parenting my son, who's my first kid, who's 7, almost 8. And so she was just having this day where she's very, very strong willed. And she is just constantly like after me for everything. And I eventually, I don't remember what was going on, but I had these like 2 major disasters happen where she let him through the puppy gate. The dog ran up and peed all over my bed upstairs, and the comforter takes hours to wash. It's really like barely fits in the washer. And then I came down, and this order I'd put up for this woman who was supposed to have come that morning to pick it up and hadn't showed up was like chewed up and gone. I couldn't find it anywhere. And so I started like losing control. I had this attack of rage, and I hit my hand so bad I really thought I'd hurt my hand and wouldn't be able to work. I forget what I even hit it on. And I had this thought, or like said it, I can't control myself. And that exactly is it. I can't, and I realize what rage to be. The body just goes and does these things, and we desperately want control of it. And I'm not, I have not given up hope that enlightenment and awakening doesn't control rage, but I do see that it's attempts to control things. Um, and so I have recently started like really putting my heart and soul into projects again. And so before I was afraid to enter that I might try to control this zone. And I just wanted to stay in this peace, and it was sort of this false kind of thing where I was scared to pick anything up because I was afraid I would get attached to it. And so now that I've let that go, of course, the need to control is going to come in. And so I've seen this pattern in my mom and myself: need to control, need to control, need to control. And then it's particularly like there's a bunch of energy on making the house completely clean and look nice. And so what do? I kick the stainless steel trash can, which I paid a lot of money for and really love. And why would I do that? I wouldn't. I can't control myself. And so I feel like those attacks of rage are a biological reaction, and they're also like this sort of pent up of trying to control. So it's both. And watch that episode with Roger Castillo. By the end of it, I had like so many insights and so much of a deeper understanding, and seeing that the not wanting to be angry was feeling I've always felt completely responsible for my actions. And so scaring the dog, I felt horrible about, because my emotional connection and trust with him as a 10-month-old puppy, I'm really into dogs and dog training, and just really I have this deep connection with animals. And so having him like see me like that and then be scared of me for the next half hour, feeling super responsible. And then in that video, Roger Castillo reframed the anger as pain pleasure movement. And it's so simple. Like, I've gone so far and it's so simple. It's seeking pleasure, avoiding pain. So much of this is that. And with depression, it's the same thing. We go into this personal development trying to get rid of the depression, and then we think that we are the ones who can do it, and we bring in this sense of control. And then we see that the depression is resistance to something that's not already there. So if you can accept the depression and not feel like the one who's responsible for it, then amazing things happen and unfold. So it's it's such a relief to realize that these emotions, when they come up, they don't mean that you're completely failing at the thing that's most important to you in the world as a spiritual seeker, and that everything as it should be. And depression is such an invitation to come closer, to feel, to deepen, to see something. And if you make intentions in your life and dare to make intentions and dare to go for your dreams, it's going to make this stuff bubble up faster. Don't be afraid to do it. Go for it. And it's not you who's doing that, and who knows if there's an end of the road. There's always, and this is another thing about understanding being a female and susceptible to hormones, and trying to accept that, when I've realized how much I've idolized men all my life and wanted to have that seriousness and that whatever I projected on them. I know they're not always that way. Um that like, if you look in nature, it's the mama bear with her cubs who's the most reactive, because that's biological. And so really, we think creation and we think survival is such a dirty thing sometimes. And this sort of thing, like the animal instinct, or in the Bible, it's called the flesh. And I think that's what they're talking about, the survival instinct. There's an animal in the woods right now. They're talking about the survival instinct. And so that's kind of felt as this dirty thing. And then um, in enlightenment and awakening, it's seen that that is okay. It's perfectly okay as it is, which can be a really threatening, scary thing if you have always sort of had this religious inclination or felt that you were more than just the body. Um, Everything's so counterintuitive and not what you think it is. That's all for today, guys. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you again soon.